Writers Center, and especially Sunil for hosting us tonight. When our revival issue came out last December, less than 1 year ago, we had release parties like this in St. Louis and New York, and a book fair stage celebration at the AWP conference in Seattle. So all 3 of those times, I had the opportunity to say we were celebrating the first release from December Press since 2008, and the first anthology format December magazine in 32 years. So now I find myself just a tiny bit shocked to say that we're so far past that milestone and already celebrating the 3rd issue in December's second life. At some point, we'll be ready to move past December's past and it's the 32-year gap in its publishing schedule. But we're not quite there yet. Because what December is today, it still has so much to do with what December had been, and which was, and I hope, still is, a community unto itself. What made December a pioneer and an icon from its inception in 1958 through the 60s and 70s and into the 80s was its commitment to excellence, its ability to spot nascent talent and to nurture it, and its willingness to provide a forum for veteran writers and artists experimenting with new ideas. I don't want to talk too much because we do have a very impressive and dynamic group of readers this evening, and I want to give them all their due. But I do want to acknowledge a couple of key individuals who are so important to December's revival that everybody here should know who they are. Stories can be told in many ways, and words are just one of those ways. For some of us, the favorite way. But images are another way, and December has always had a tradition of publishing art that also makes a statement. Buzz Spector, December's art editor, is a spectacular artist in his own right. He's a professor at the College of Art at Washington University, a renowned scholar and critic. Buzz has been instrumental in December's rebirth in many ways, but in particular significance are the time and energy he puts into making sure that December's artistic sensibilities match its literary sensibilities. I also want to give a shout out to Judy Kramer, who since August has been our business manager, providing much needed organization to our day-to-day activities. The administrative tasks of any literary journal are unique and varied, but especially one that's part historic legacy and part total startup, with no existing infrastructure at all. So some of you have met Judy already at the table. Now she's sitting there with the camera. You can stop by and introduce yourselves after the readings. So on with the readings. Many of you have read or heard the story of how I came to operate December. If you haven't, there's a lengthy explanation in the editor's note of volume 24, the revival issue. But the Reader's Digest version is that I just jumped. We created a new nonprofit organization to acquire both December and December Press. I went to Chicago, where December had been based for 40 years, signed the paperwork, and loaded up a rental van with 40 boxes of back issues of the journal and books that had been published under the December Press imprint. I got home to St. Louis, unpacked the boxes, and started registering what I'd gotten myself into. 2 things became evident. One, as I read issue after issue, I discovered what had to be the first or among the earliest work of many of my favorite poets and short story writers. December had an even richer history, richer path than I had ever imagined. And 2, what I hadn't quite realized before was that fact of that December hadn't been published in 32 years. How could I revive a journal with this legacy and reputation and do it justice? So we started with an idea for a revival issue with a then and now theme, featuring work from some of December's original contributors and some new voices. In January 2013, I sent out a letter to 160 of December's original contributors, writers whose work had appeared in December between 1958 and 1981, announcing the revival and inviting them to send new work for this effort. I mailed the letters on a Wednesday afternoon, January 31st, and I held my breath, waiting for a response. Just 5 days later, I got an email from Linda Pastan saying, "It is indeed good news that December will be revived," with 3 lovely poems attached. I figured we must be onto something. If Linda Pastan was responding to my letter in 5 days and sending new poems to boot, I was already plenty familiar with her poetry, which often addresses themes of family life, mortality, and the fragility of relationships. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Linda's long list of awards, including the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, Pushcart Prize, the Dylan Thomas Award, and plenty of others. A lot of reviews have been written about Linda's work, but my favorite is a Christian Science Monitor review of her book Traveling Light, which said, "She shows that poetry can be meaningful, satisfying, lovely, and leave people feeling whole." Linda's first appearance in December was her poem All Thumbs in 1973. The next was her 3 poems in the revival issue, exactly 40 years later. It was an honor for December to publish Linda's poem 41 years ago now, and an honor to publish her work again last year, and a special honor to have her here tonight to kick off December's DC celebration. It's my pleasure to introduce Linda Pastan.